extends the requirement the governing bodies of public agencies need to be physically present together to hold a public meeting. It allows us to hold a public meeting by video conference if we have a quorum of board members and that our meeting is made available to the public and media. We have met those requirements tonight. Since we have suspended individual board member comments during these virtual meetings, I would like to say a few words on behalf of our board. We want to take this opportunity to recognize the recent civil unrest in our world. Every community, every person has been affected in some way by the events over the last few weeks. The school town of Munster will continue to review policies and practices, connect with other local organizations, and listen to stakeholders to help us nurture a culture of respect for all. From the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, quote, ground zero for an equitable, non-racist society is the K-12 classroom. We are committed to doing our part in that educational role. Also, our sincerest congratulations to the class of 2020 and their families as they celebrated their virtual graduation ceremony and the senior send-off parade this past weekend. Mr. Wells and his Munster High School team went above and beyond to provide a truly unique and memorable experience for our seniors. Mission accomplished. Thank you to everyone. It was a great team effort. And to my fellow board members, will you please state your name after you offer a motion or second so that Deb Hayes can accurately record our proceedings. Also, voting by roll call, which was recommended by the Indiana Public Access Council. Roll call will be done by our secretary, Melissa Higginson. I apologize for the length of those comments, but given the fact that we haven't been able to make comments individually as board members, we felt it important to do that tonight. Action item 1.5, public comment information. All comments may be submitted to public comment at munster.us and the board will review them at a later date. Consent agenda. Mr. Trickenfellis?
Dr. Schwartz-Wolf, the consent agenda items include item 2.1, the approval of the minutes. And the minutes are posted online in board docs and they are available on the screen. Obviously, you've had a chance to review those as all board members as item 2.1. It includes item 2.2, the approval of accounts payable voucher register. Item 2.3, the approval of the payroll voucher register. Item 2.4, the approval of the personnel report, which will contain two things tonight. One will be the regular personnel report, including the retirements of Joanne Harbath and Janice Jacksich, both longtime employees of the school town of Munster. Sorry to see them leave. The resignations as listed. One elimination of a position as listed. And then 3 recommendations of employment as listed, and that is Rachel Bell, early childhood teacher, Frank Hammond, Caitlin O'Donnell, a speech and language pathologist, and then Dylan Thompson, a science teacher at Munster High School. The other personnel item would be the approval of the summer school staff recommendations, and you have seen this available, and again, it's online in board docs. But here you'll see the summer school staff recommendations, so you understand that even through distance learning or remote learning or e-learning, whatever you want to call it, we're still trying to offer our students a large amount of courses in summer school this summer. So with that, the administration recommends that the board approve the consent agenda items 2.1 through 2.5 as, or 2.4 as presented.
Would any of the board like any of these items be broken down individually? Can I get a motion?
Melissa Higginson, so moved.
A second?
John Castro, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, we would like to take a vote. Mrs. Higginson?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higginson, aye. Rana Stojic.
He's muted. Ron, you're muted.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartz-Wolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right, action item 3.1, donations. Can I get a motion to approve donations as presented?
John Castro.
John Doherty, so moved.
Second?
John Castro, second.
And any discussion?
You will see that we have a small donation to the art club for Munster High School this month. And then the PTO at Wilburette Middle School has donated $500 for those 8th grade class of 2020 yard signs.
Very nice. Any other comments or discussion? All right, Mrs. Higgison, I'm calling for a vote.
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higgison, aye. Rhonda Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.2, consolidated 1028, additional appropriation public hearing. I'd like to open a public hearing at this time. Is Mr. Qualkenbush going to speak?
Yes, good evening, Madam President, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Jeff Qualkenbush from Barnes & Thornburg. In connection with the 2 bond issues that are being proposed by the administration and in your board packet this evening, there are 2 sets of public hearings that you're required to take, and you can take all of those as one consolidated public hearing. The first one is what is known as the 1028 portion, and that deals with the actual projects that are being financed. And in the first 2020 A bond series, that's financing various facility improvements across the district, like painting, paving, general upkeep, playground equipment, those sorts of things. And anytime you're doing a project that's going to cost more than $1 million, you have to have that component of the public hearing. The second bond issue, the 2020B bond issue, is a reimbursement bond issue, reimbursing the school corporation for prior bus purchases that have been made for the last several years out of what used to be your bus replacement fund and is now a part of your operations fund. By doing that project, you're able to put money back into your operations fund to help mitigate any sort of losses that you're going to experience over the next year to 2 years from circuit breaker, as you in Lake County are moving away from being grandfathered for certain circuit breaker experiences and not have to then hit your referendum fund for that. Both of those financings, Brock Bauscher from Baker Tilly will go into more detail, but are able to be done without any tax rate increase associated with it because of your other debt falling off. So it's able to maintain the tax rate that you have. The second part of the public hearings is the additional appropriation. Just like whenever you have in your regular budget, you have appropriation line items for every expenditure that you have to have, but because bond issues and bond proceeds are not included in your budget on an annual basis and are only done at the time you actually do the bond financing, you have to hold an additional appropriation public hearing for both of those. Those are in the amount of $2.4 million for the 2020 A bonds and $3.5 million for the 2020 B bonds. The reason those are more than the amount of your bond authorization, which is $2 million and $3 million, is because the appropriation has to be both for the bond proceeds plus the interest earnings. And because some of these may be sitting in there for a period of time, well, I don't think you'll be able to earn $400,000 or $500,000 in today's interest rate environment. You can always have an appropriation that is in excess of what you need. And then when the project is completed, it just expires at that point. So that's the financial process that you're going through and the legal process that you're going through. If you want any more details on the projects or the financing structure behind that, we could have Mr. Melby get on and talk as well about that. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Brock Bauscher to walk through the short financial presentation. At the end of that, you will then see if there's been any public comment that's been submitted by email. We did publish notice of these 2 hearings in the newspaper at least 10 days in advance. And we told people that not only could they show up in the boardroom and speak if they wanted to, but if they didn't want to do that, they could alternatively submit a question or comment to the Munster Finance email website. So I don't believe there's been any that's been received, but we should confirm that with Mr. Melby as we get to the end of that public comment section. Once that's done, we would conclude that, and then we'd move into the 4 resolutions that are on your agenda. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bauscher.
Thank you, Mr. Qualkenbush. Madam President, members of the board, pleasure to be back talking with the School Title Munster Board this evening. I'm going to, looks like I'm not able to share my screen, so never mind that, but hoping everyone has tonight's presentation in front of them. It's dated June 8th, 2020 for this public hearing, and I'll go through some of the preliminary financial impact related to these bond issues.
Brock, you might be able to share your screen at this time. I stopped sharing mine to see if yours could share then.
Okay, thank you. Great. Let me try this. So now going through the presentation here, slide 1. Oops, jump down. Slide 2 is the math behind what our outstanding debt looks like, and this is a snapshot from 2019 through 2037. I know it can be rather difficult to see on this shared screen, so I'll jump now to slide 3. Might be a little bit easier to see. So the 3 colors that are represented in your outstanding debt as of today, the olive green here, you can see that matures at the end of 2037 is the exempt debt or the capital referendum debt that we currently have outstanding. And you can see in 2020, we jumped to what should be our expected amount through 2029 of around $4 million before we begin to level off before the bonds mature in 2037. The 2 colors of blue we have, the dark blue is represented by the debt that has always been non-exempt debt. Then the shaded blue is the debt that this board recalls that transitioned from exempt to non-exempt as part of the Lake County transition in 2020. So again, as this board's very well versed on what that transition from exempt to non-exempt and the impact to taxpayers and now receiving that tax rate as part of the circuit breaker or the thresholds of 1% for residential, 2% for long-term care, and 3% for commercial and industrial. We know that, excuse me, we have debt after 2020, after this budget year, that begins to fall off. So good opportunity to, as Mr. Qualkenbush mentioned, to fill in some of this debt that is beginning to fall off without any impact to taxpayers. So in working with the working group, looked and identified that general obligation bonds is the path selected to issue both a combination of taxable and tax exempt bonds. So before we move on, what I reference what our geo capacity is as of today, and it's a formula based upon your net assessed value of approximately 1.6 billion and divide by 3 and multiply by 2%. So the total geo capacity, not counting or factoring any outstanding geo bonds, is about $11 million. As of today, we have about $3.97 million of outstanding debt. So as of today, as we consider this resolution, we have almost $7 million of geo capacity outstanding. So certainly fits within our geo capacity again as of today. In looking at what our projected levy will be and our year-end estimated non-exempt balances will be, the blue bars represent our outstanding debt as of today. Then the gray line represents our estimated debt service tax levy before we issue any bonds. And this yellow line represents our year-end balances. So again, you can see that if we were not issue or consider any debt, we would have a pretty substantial decrease in our overall tax levy. So that's how we're able to fit in repayments beginning in 2021 without impacting the taxpayer to what they're paying in 2020. So working with the team, proposing tax exempt bonds of $2 million and a taxable borrowing of $3 million. So a total aggregate amount of $5 million. In using very conservative interest rates, we're able to get it in and out of the market, but again, using conservative interest rates, assuming that the total interest expense would be $476,000. We'll do our best to market these bonds for at least a week to banks and underwriters to create as much competition we can. And you can see for both issuances, we're presuming and plan for a 2-year and 5-month repayment based upon the timeline that's been developed by Mr. Qualkenbush. in scheduling and determining the repayment, we'll be able to keep our total non-exempt debt service levy to about $6.4 million, which enables us to drop the non-exempt debt service tax rate from about 62 cents down to 39 cents. So even with issuing these bonds, we'll be able to decrease the tax rate to 39 cents that we're estimating. So that's, and similar to the chart you just saw, the dark blue represents the outstanding debt as of today. The gray line represents the estimated annual non-exempt debt service tax levy. The yellow line represents our year-ending non-exempt cash balance. The light blue represents the $3 million of taxable bonds, and I'll call that turquoise for I'm not an art teacher or have any type of artistic ability, so I'll just throw around some words for colors, but perhaps a turquoise color for the proposed $2 million tax-exempt bond. So again, you can see that we're able to structure these in a way to get us to about $6.4 million levy, at least for 2021 and 2022. And we could reevaluate beginning as early as 2022 whether there's an opportunity or desire to continue to fill in debt long-term for the non-exempt debt service fund. We also have some supplemental information on what the repayment structure looked like, again, using an estimated conservative interest rate of 5%, how we develop these numbers. So at this time, welcome any questions.
I will say at this time, Jeff Quackenbush, there is no public comment to the best of my knowledge.
I had one question. This is John Castro. Initially, you mentioned a reimbursement bond. How does that differ, or is that different than the types of bonds that School Town of Munster has traditionally utilized?
Very good question. It is different than what you've utilized in the past because what it is doing is instead of funding projects going forward for capital improvements like the $2 million 2020A bond, it is a reimbursement for prior expenditures that the School Town of Munster has incurred primarily in connection with the acquisition of buses. Because it is a reimbursement bond, the interest is not excludable from federal income tax for the holders of those bonds. Therefore, that's why it's called taxable. But because taxable interest rates are so low right now, they are right equal almost to tax-exempt rates. It doesn't cost you any more in doing it as a taxable bond issue, especially this short of a maturity that we're talking about of 2.5 years versus a tax-exempt bond, given that they're going to be both relatively short. The reason that we're doing the reimbursement bond is because in looking at your overall protected taxes impact, there is going to be could be a significant hit in your operations fund over the next couple of years due to circuit breaker. And this allows you to get that money in there and pay for it indirectly out of your debt service fund over the next 2 years and avoid the need to find other revenues to offset that short-term loss in your operations fund.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you both for the presentation. At this time, I would like to close the public hearing. We will now go to action item 3.3. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 805-1028, reimbursement bond resolution 2020 A bonds as presented?
So move, Rana Stojic.
A second?
Second, Melissa
John
Higgins.
Doherty.
Pick one, Deb. And any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Higgison, can we get a vote, please?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higgison, aye. Rana Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.4, resolution number 806. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 806, additional appropriation resolution 2020 A bonds as presented?
John Castro, I move that we adopt resolution number 806 as presented.
John Doherty, second.
And any discussion on this one? Hearing none, may we get a vote, Melissa Higginson?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higginson, aye. Rhonda Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartz-Wolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.5. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 807, additional appropriation resolution 2020 A bonds as presented?
So move, Rhonda Stojic.
Second, Melissa Higginson.
And any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Higginson, can we get a vote?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higginson, aye. Rhonda Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartz-Wolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.6. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 808-1028, reimbursement bond resolution 2020B bonds as presented?
John Castro, I move we approve resolution number 808 as presented.
John Doherty, second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Higginson, can we get a vote?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higginson, aye. Rhonda Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartz-Wolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.7. Can I get a motion to approve the handbooks for the 2020-2021 school year as presented?
So move, Rhonda Stojic.
Second, Melissa Higginson.
Okay, and any discussion?
I would like to add one bit of discussion with your permission, Madam President. Through the time period from last month to this month, we did have some questions by our board members, and we noticed that there was one thing that was left off some of the revisions from the Wilburite Middle School Handbook. They forgot, I shouldn't say forgot, but vacations was left out of that and how it's addressed at the middle school. So you should see on your screens the revision that will happen, addition on page 14. So I would recommend that if you could revise your motion to approve the elementary and the high school handbooks as presented and Wilburite Middle School with the addition of the definition of vacations and how they're handled with attendance.
Okay. So can I get whoever made that first motion to?
So can you bring that back on? Thank you. I move that we accept the handbooks as presented and with the correction in addition to the Wilburite additional handbook revision for vacations.
Second, Melissa Higginson.
Okay, thank you. And any further discussion?
I would like to add one more item of further discussion. As our administrative team is talking about the reentry plans for the school town of Munster, you will probably see some additional addenda to the handbooks, hopefully in July or August when we have a little bit more information and can devise a good plan after we get some information from our students and parents. So just realize that we'll probably have some additional addendum things that will directly be related to COVID-19 and the reentry to school.
I would imagine there would need to be things relating to absences with respect to quarantine and things like that on both the student and staff side.
Yeah, and we've already talked about several items that we'd like to add, and obviously absences, if there's going to be PPE, social distancing, things like that will be added to the handbooks, and they'll be listed as addendums. And our handbooks are all digital, so they'll be put in digitally for the students to have.
Excellent.
So just
Mr. Triggerfeldis,
go ahead, John.
is there any chance that the calendar is going to change?
You broke up a little bit. I didn't hear your whole question.
And is there any is there any chance that the calendar will be changing due to COVID-19?
That will be discussions that we'll have to have in a work session if that's a possibility. Right now, we're hoping to sustain our school calendar as it is already originally done to try to respect our parents. But that's something that could be a discussion, but it hasn't been a major discussion point at this time. If we have to transition to e-learning for short bits of time frame when the school may be closed or not, that's something we could do. But it's going to be a discussion item we can probably bring up, which we may need a work session with the school board in June or July to discuss those options if they present themselves at that time.
Mr. Trippenfeld, so generally any changes, I mean, obviously there's a lot of unknowns right now. There's a lot of things that we're waiting for guidance on and under various topics. So any of these things will be allowed or able to be addressed through the addenda that we can discuss and then later approve. And especially since it's digital, it's a lot easier to manage.
Yes, that is correct. As you know, the guidance from the DOE came out on Friday. We actually had a rather extensively long meeting today with our administrative team to try to address some of those things. So it's a process, but yes, all of them will be brought to you guys. And if there's a need for an additional board meeting at that time, because we have to approve them, we'll do that prior to the times we have to, but there will be changes. Just need to know that.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hickison, I'm calling for a vote.
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higgison, aye. Rana Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.8. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 809, the temporary transfer of funds as presented?
I move that we approve resolution 809 as presented. John Castro.
Second.
John Doherty, second.
Thank you. And any discussion?
Just to clarify, this is because the property tax collection date is pushed back?
Correct. As we have said in previous board meetings, due to Governor Holcomb's Executive Order 20-005, waived the property taxes paid during the 60 days prior to May 11th, a period of after May 11th, we knew our tax draw was going to be effective because of that. I ran permutations in the past saying, how can we handle this? Some schools had to do TAW, some schools had to go to the bond bank, but because of the money that we have in rainy day, we have more than enough to cover the shortage. And I will talk about that more when we do our financial report. But resolution 809 will give us the ability to transfer the amount over that is needed to cover the tax draw that we do not receive, so we do not go in the red. You'll notice that it doesn't have a dollar amount. That's because we do not know how much we will receive in June. Once we find out, obviously we'll have a dollar amount. We'll transfer over to the penny how much it would take to keep us whole or keep us out of the red. And quite frankly, I do not think in pension debt we will need this at all, but we do want to have that just in case moving forward we would need to. As of right now, if we do not receive anything in debt service or referendum exempt debt, we would need to transfer money over from rainy day to cover that if we don't receive anything more in June.
Thank you.
Mr. Melby, I see this as a temporary transfer of funds, and I also notice listed in the motion that the funds must be returned to rainy day by December 31st, 2020.
Correct. That's a great point. Again, our belief is we will probably receive all of our money by the end of August, September. But again, we've never gone through this before. We want to make sure we have a conservative approach. But yes, as soon as the tax come in, we would transfer the money back into rainy day. Great point.
Thank you, sir.
Just one hypothetical then, Mr. Melby. What happens if the county just doesn't get us the money in August?
If they do not by August, that's a great point. Remember, we get our tax draws mainly in June and December. So you may normally go July, August, September, October without receiving a tax draw. The money that we would transfer over would cover us until the December draw. If we do not receive any more money, then we would be able to cover it with money from rainy day. If we do not receive money for June and nothing for December, then that's a much larger issue. And that would be an issue that would be in every school across the state.
Thank you, Ms. Melby.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, Mrs. Higgison, can I call for a vote, please?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higgison, aye. Rana Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Action item 3.9. Can I get a motion to approve board delegates parking lot quotes as presented.
Melissa,
So moved, oh, go ahead. So moved, Rhonda Stojic.
second, Melissa Higgison.
Thank you. And any discussion?
Just like last month, this is sort of a timing issue due to COVID. It's a lot harder to get architects and engineers on site to do the things that you need to in a timely fashion. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. We received the information to go ahead. We have the information we need to get the parking lots going. Our concern is if we wait a full month, again, to get it approved in the next board meeting, that would really put us in a bind to try to get the parking lots done before school. And that's our goal, is to try to get as many parking lots done before school as possible. So this would give us the ability, just like the pool deck last month, they're starting the pool deck this week. That would have never been possible if we had to wait until today to get the approval for it. As soon as we get the approval, as soon as we get the quotes in, the bids in, we can choose one. And then after mobilization, which is usually a couple of weeks, they can start and get the projects done as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Melby. Any other discussion or questions? I would like to call for a vote, Mrs. Higgison.
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higgison, aye. Rhonda Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Director of Financial Operations report, Mr. Melby.
Normally, I spend a lot of time on the education fund, or more time in the education operations fund and referendum fund than the other funds. I'm going to flip the switch a little today, but I will talk about the education fund. If you look at the education fund, the numbers are very similar to where we expected them to be by the end of May. We are actually exceeding where we thought we would be at this period. You also see that our revenue is higher than our expenditures for the month, so that we increased our cash balance in that fund, which is always a positive. In our operations fund, you will notice in May, in previous months, I did say we were going to ask for an early tax draw. We did receive over $370,000 in an early tax draw. So to be quite honest, that's more than I thought we would receive in May. You will see that means it brought our revenue after our transfer from education operations to just under $700,000. And our expenditures for the month were just over $425,000. So again, we were able to increase our cash balance in the operations fund as well, which is a very good thing, because if we do not receive, and you'll notice on that resolution, we did not put the operations fund, because if we do not receive any money in June or the rest of the tax draw, we can carry ourselves, because we prepared ourselves for this year with the fiscal cliff, and we wanted to build our cash balance in the operations fund to carry whatever happened. Well, if we do not receive our tax draw, we will be able to sustain and not go into red in this fund. If we go into the referendum operations, again, you will see a significant early cash draw. We received over $1 million in May. Again, I do not anticipate, and I should say this for the operations fund as well, I do not anticipate us receiving all $3 million more in June. Be quite honest, I feel we'll get significantly less than that. We will receive more in July and August, but I didn't want to change it here. I have many permutations in which I did change it, where we received nothing in June and what would happen and so on. But we did receive $1 million in this fund. That is why in other funds, we may go into the red. But here, even if we do not receive the $3 million in June, we would still stay in the black. And we will probably be able to withstand that even if we don't receive anything until December, but it will be very close. So I will be keeping an eye on that. We'll be talking about it at every board meeting, just to make sure our projections are very close to where we're going. But how it looks, we should be fine in this fund as well. If you look at our referendum exempt capital debt service fund, we did get an early tax draw of $320,000. And in that fund, you could see very easily, if we do not receive anything in June, which is over $700,000, if we collect all $700,000, we would only have $100,000 in that fund. So if we receive nothing, we will go in the red, and that's why we needed that resolution to cover that. And again, what we receive we will take that off the number, and what we need to cover ourselves, that's exactly what we are going to send over. So there's a very good chance we will have to send some money over for the referendum exempt debt. In pension debt, we did receive an early tax draw of over $53,000. And that brought our cash balance up to over $350,000. If we do not receive any money in June, we should be fine in this fund. And we should be fine for the next several months in there, but we did want to put it down just in case something happened in the future where we needed it. And then in debt service, we received another significant early tax draw of approximately $1.3 million. That brought our cash balance up to $4 million. But again, we're going to bring in, we anticipated normally approximately $3.6 million more in June. If we do not receive any of that money, we will go in the red, and that's why we have to have the rainy day coverage. Again, depending on how much we receive in June, and we haven't really gotten, my indication is we're going to receive money very late in June. So once we get those numbers, I'll plug them in and we can see where we're at exactly, and we'll know how much we have to transfer over from rainy day to those funds. And that's it.
Quick question, Mr. Melby. I was just going to ask if they gave you an indication, mid-June, late June. You just said late June. After that, when will we likely get the information then to say, okay, well, here's X in late June. We're still looking to get you an additional X plus 10 in late July? Or when will we have more of an idea of what that final number will look like?
I could tell you this is unprecedented times. So anytime we've asked for some guidance or where they think we're going to be, we really haven't gotten much information. So I don't expect us to get as much guidance moving forward, but I do know they've obviously, with the early tax draws that we received, they did try to send over as much as they could. That's my opinion. And obviously, as sooner people do their taxes, the more money we would receive.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Melby? Thank you, Mr. Melby. Item number 5.1, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to cover a couple things. I believe that Mr. Trippenfeld has pointed out today that we had a pretty long and exhaustive meeting talking on a couple of subjects. The big one was the possible way that we re-enter school next fall. As many of you may be aware of, July 1, schools will be reopened for business per the governor's executive order. So we will be bringing all of our office staff back at that time, but we will continue to do social distancing and also wearing the PPE. As we've looked at that, I want to first give credit to Dr. Stokes because she painstakingly went through the large in-class document from the DOE, pulled out some key elements, and put together a discussable PowerPoint for us today that looked at things like reviewing the key considerations impacting decisions on reopening schools. She also had conversation points about discussing the considerations for re-entry scenarios to support student academic learning and social emotional needs, and also discussing the considerations for staffing, programming to support continuity of learning for all students, targeted intervening services. I think the things that are important when you look at, I know maybe you can't see this, but if you go on the DOE website and pull this document up, there's information about budgeting, finance, consideration, school board policies that need to be put into place, the things that I do as a superintendent, the considerations I have to look at, all the way over to maintenance department in terms of keeping the buildings maintained and clean during this period until something comes up, to whether it's a vaccination or so-called cure for COVID-19. We also have exceptional learner considerations that play into this. The principals have numerous items that they've got to review and understand. as of July 1, athletics will be opened up in certain sports. Some are available to compete, others have to wait a certain time frame. And also exactly how we go about doing athletics in terms of keeping the athletes safe throughout the seasons. There's a lot of health and safety considerations. What are we doing with, for example, taking temperatures of students, checking them for fevers, and also what do we do with them, the steps we need to take if someone is reported in the building with a high fever or COVID. So there's a lot of recommendations there. Technology, again, that's wide open from whether we return with e-learning to doing some kind of e-learning on some days, some actual student attendance in the buildings, and what kind of technology needs to be present to support that. Transportation considerations, how do you social distance on a bus when you have a capacity of 66 seats, but you're supposed to spread people out basically at 6 feet or so apart. So that goes on to then how do we also provide professional development? What about hiring of more staff for trying to clean the buildings, feed students, supporting teachers who may not be able to return specifically into the building, but we do some kind of distance learning. Aids. So this is just a comprehensive plan. And she went on and on and on. And then we did look at, I believe, at least a minimum of 7 scenarios that we could possibly use to return to school. And we've narrowed it down to 3 considerations. But again, at this point, I think we're still looking for some guidance from the state. I think our biggest concern as a school corporation is the actual impact financially to doing anything here, because everything we looked at has a huge price tag, from transporting kids to just think about cleaning the buildings and keeping staff safe with just supplying them with the PPE equipment. We're looking at liability insurance. What happens if someone gets COVID-19? How is that treated for an employee or a student? It's a monumental, I don't know, it's the document that the DOE gave us was fairly comprehensive, but still left a lot for the local schools and health departments to make decisions about. What was in there was a lot that we had initially discussed, and we still have a lot more to determine. I think the key thing is, for example, at the high school, how do we make sure our high school students get the credits they need for the careers, pathways, diplomas, track? And Mr. Wells and Mr. Snyder have been reviewing that as well. Some of the things we're a little bit more flexible at the elementary and the middle school, but the high school is really going to be a huge undertaking for us unless we return everybody back to school at once. So I can't really get into details as much in my little time I have here, but I will just say over time, we'll probably have to come back with a work session with the board to just run through these scenarios because, and we're trying to put some price tags to these things because technology as well, if we're going to put cameras in the classrooms so that some students can be home and some students can be at school at the same time. We also have to consider what happens if students and parents don't want to return to the school but would want distance learning or e-learning at home. What does that look like? How do we support that? So I think we still have a lot more questions than answers. We have a lot more concerns about how do we financially support returning to schooling in the fall. And we also have real concerns about our parents because if we do some kind of a hybrid schedule of being in school and being at home, how's that going to impact parents at work? And so one of the big things we're going to do is within the next couple days here, we're going to be sending out a survey to parents to find out where they stand with having their children return to school, because that's going to have an impact on decisions we make in terms of one of our scenarios. So I think that's important. So I wanted to kind of make sure that we have that in place so we can kind of move forward with making some recommendations to the board on which approach to take. So that was a pretty long discussion today with all the principals involved and our central office team. So I wanted to bring that up. The second half of our meeting today concerned the way we look at our school corporation in terms of meeting the needs of our students. And specifically, many things are really heavy on our hearts with what the protesters have come out and are asking for. And then we've gotten a lot of emails from concerned citizens about what we are doing in our district to meet the needs of our students, especially our African American and Hispanic students, basically our students of color, and trying to meet their needs, support them. And so I want to just talk a little bit about that, because we've not been about a knee-jerk reaction. Actually, before the COVID-19, before the unfortunate events that started this with not just the death of George Floyd, but the other incidents that have occurred in the past probably 2 or 3 years. But I think the George Floyd death was probably the final, tipping point for what we're seeing today in our society. And I wanted to say that Dr. Stokes had been working with the elementary and was working through providing a program with our teachers to educate them on working with students in with diverse backgrounds and different diverse cultures. And so we started on that process, work through professional development, and that kind of got stopped because of COVID-19. So I know some people have been asking, what are we doing? Well, we were already being proactive about that. And we've been working on this for quite a while and addressing how we can better serve the needs of our students in the different subgroups in our district. So that's something we've been really proactive about. But we also have pointed out that we have always investigated to the best of our abilities claims and concerns when it involves discrimination and harassment. While I've been superintendent, we have had investigations. We have reviewed. We've used outside resources when we needed to do a fair and proper investigation of accusations when they've been reported to us. And we will continue to do so, and we'll continue to address issues that come up, because we think it's important to support our students and support our staff, and making sure that everyone by law is supported and not discriminated based on all the factors that the federal and state government have laid out for us that we must do and have to do legally, and we will continue to do that. With that being said, we will continue on as we can get back to some regular type of schooling. We will continue to work with our faculty and staff to continue to educate them on being culturally sensitive and sensitive to all races in terms of understanding where they are and trying to make sure that we meet their needs. We also have worked very hard in the past to make sure we're doing a better job with students of exceptional needs. We've also done quite a bit to reach out to students who are part of the LGBT communities and the programs we've done there. And we're going to continue to do so. because we think it's important. We also feel that having a diverse staff is extremely important. I mean, my goal is always to hire the best and brightest to support our students. We want them, the best teachers, the best staff members involved. But we especially feel that if we can find people who have diverse backgrounds, we want to hire them. If they're equal to anybody else, we think it's important to try to bring in as much diversity and help for our students to see good role models of people who are successful that, you know, look like them. I think that's extremely important. So we have been very fortunate in the time I've been here to hire diverse people to come into our district from different races, different ethnic backgrounds, different religions. So I think that is important because we are a diverse school corporation. I think many people feel like, oh, we're just 90% white. We're not. We have a lot more diversity in this school district than probably many people really think. And our job is to try to, at some point, integrate in enough people that everybody feels like there's someone there that can listen to them and understand their view of the world or their plight or understand them as a person. And I think that's important. And we're going to continue to do that to find ways to better support our students in the classroom. We also feel that we need to reach out to parents in our community, people in our community of color, and bring them in and try to make sure that we are a school system that is inclusive and not exclusive to groups of people. And that's where we stand on that. So I do appreciate people emailing me and sharing me their thoughts and wanting to know what we're going to do. This is something that we will continue to work on and try to improve on as a school corporation. We are not perfect by all means. We do fall short in many areas. We will continue to get better. And we understand that we have to reach out and take other people's views and listen to them. And I think the key thing is really listen to what people to say instead of trying to put our views or actions on somebody else. We need to listen to see where they are coming from and why they think the way they do, and maybe better look at our policies and our practices and try to get them to where they fit more of our population students' needs. And so I just wanted to point that out tonight, that we are working hard to try to do a better job of meeting the needs of all of our students, especially students in our Black and brown populations, because that's important. And that's really what the protests are all about, besides the issues with dealing with the police departments. So I just wanted to point that out tonight, that we're working hard to try to do a better job as a school system. So I just wanted to share that with the board and the public.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. Appreciate your comments. Item 6.1 announcements. The next regular school board meeting that we hope is in person is on July 13th at 7 p.m. Mr. Castro will be running that meeting. I will not be in town. And can I get a motion for adjournment?
John Doherty, so moved.
John
Melissa
Castro.
Higginson.
Okay, Melissa, may we have a vote, please?
John Castro.
Aye.
John Doherty.
Aye.
Melissa Higginson, aye. Rana Stojic.
Aye.
Ingrid Schwartzwolf.
Aye, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Castro?